growing numbers of English learner students in the Northeast are a research priority for REL Northeast Islands and its English Language Learners Alliance. Most recently, the Alliance wanted to know what we could learn from studying English learners at a single mid-sized urban district in New England.
The study grew out of the needs and interests of the English Language Learners Alliance, and members of the Alliance were very interested in understanding how to meet the diverse needs of English learners, particularly the different kinds of programs that English learners participate in. The study analyzed data on English learner students and looked at their characteristics, as well as the school characteristics and the characteristics of the programs they participated in. And we looked at the relationship between all of those variables and the outcomes we were interested in, which were English language proficiency as well as proficiency in math and reading on the state assessments. We used a statistical method called hierarchical linear modeling because we had a situation where we had students who were nested in schools. And what this modeling method allows us to do is to account for the fact that students who are in the same schools are likely to be more similar to each other and to have more similar experiences than students who are in other schools. We learned three main things. First, we learned that English learners with disabilities perform on average much lower than all other English learners in reading, mathematics, and in English proficiency. Second, we didn't find any clear patterns in achievement across English learner programs. So, for example, students that attended English as a second language programs were not necessarily any more likely to perform better or worse than students in transitional bilingual programs. Finally, we found that English language proficiency was by far the greatest predictor of achievement in math and reading. There's a few important takeaways from this study. First, it's clear that English learners are a complex group, and there are subgroups within them that need particular kinds of instruction or attention. So, for example, English learners with disabilities. Clearly, schools and districts need to think carefully about the kinds of services that those students are receiving, both English language services as well as special education services. Second, it turns out that it's not quite as easy as we had hoped to identify the quality or the impact of different kinds of English learner programs. And so it may be that rather than focus on the labels of the programs, we actually need to be looking at the instructional strategies that students are receiving rather than the programs. And finally, while it may seem self-evident that students' English proficiency scores are the biggest predictor of their performance on math and reading, there actually are important things that teachers can take away from that lesson. For example, teachers use data to drive their instruction, and if they're looking at students' English proficiency scores, they may be seeing changes in those scores before they start seeing changes in the math and reading scores, and that can help them better understand the kinds of learning that their students are experiencing. This study is informing our ongoing research in a number of different ways. First, it's clear that we need to include certain variables in future research to be able to answer the kinds of questions that we're interested in. We need to include students' initial English proficiency to be able to understand where students begin. We also need to make sure that our research really focuses on looking at change over time, since we're most interested with English learners in how well they're learning English, and that takes time to happen. There are also things that we can take away from this study that have implications in terms of the work. And this has to do with understanding more about the subgroups of English learners. And there's a real need to coordinate services for those students in order to meet their needs better.